Roots wants his stuff printed today.
Yeah, I know, I got it.
You
I got it.
All
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. See you in quorum. I call this meeting to order. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to confirm the minutes from February 14th, 2019. Moved by Councilor Nunziata. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any petitions at this time? Seeing none, and now we will go through the items. Councilor Nunziata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to take a minute. Most people here know Spiros. Where's Spiros? Where are you?
It's hiding at the back.
Spiros. So he's the supervisor of traffic operations at Etobicoke York District, and he started with the city in 1975 as a student, 36 years full-time, 44 years with the city, including student service, and he's retiring next Tuesday, and this is his last community council meeting. So I just wanted to say, you know, on behalf of council and the staff, congratulations and enjoy your retirement. And thank you, Spiros, for all the years of service that you have given to us, and in particular my constituents in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should we have a recorded vote if we let him retire or not? Okay. 4.1, preliminary report, 12, 16, and 20 Cordova Avenue, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application. Councilor Ford, could you move that for me, please?
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 4.2, preliminary report, 25 Mabelle Avenue, zoning bylaw amendment application. Councilor Ford, could you move that for me, please?
So moved.
Moving the staff recommendations, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. 4.3, preliminary report, 1 Richview Road, zoning bylaw amendment application. Councilor Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the staff recommendations.
Councilor Holliday moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 4.4, preliminary report, 1218 Roy York Road, zoning bylaw amendment application. Councilor Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to hold that.
A hold. 4.5, intention to designate under Part 1V, Section 20 of the Ontario Heritage Act, 58 Wheatfield Road. We have speakers at 9:45. 4.6, residential demolition application, 27 Brownville Avenue. Councilor Nunziata.
Okay, I would like to move the recommendation number 3.
It's on the screen. So Councilor Nunziata is moving number 3 to approve the applicant to demolish the existing one-story residential building with the following conditions. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 4.7, naming a proposed private street at 5365 Dundas Street West in my ward. Councilor Ford.
So moved.
Councilor Ford's moved the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 4.8, permanent closure of portion of Dundas Street West abutting 3819 Bloor Street West. Councilor Ford.
Move staff recommendations.
Councilor Ford moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 4.9, exclusive right turn lane, Eglinton Avenue West at Commerce Boulevard. Councilor Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the staff recommendations.
Councilor Holliday moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 10, traffic control signals at Dundas Street West and Acorn Avenue, private driveway access. I'm going to hold that in my name. 411, all-way stop control at Delma Avenue and Mitcham Drive. If you could move that on my behalf, with thanks to staff.
So moved.
Councilor Ford's moved the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 4.12, stop control, George Brownlee Court at Ypres Road. Councilor Nunziata.
Yes, I move the recommendation.
Councilor Nunziata moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 13, permit parking with newly created 15A permit area, Rutherford Avenue and Victoria Boulevard from street specific to area based. Councilor Nunziata.
Yes, this has been deferred a couple months, and what I did have a public meeting on it, so at this point I'm just going to move receipt.
Moving receipt?
Yeah.
Councilor Nunziata moving receipt of 13. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 14, designation of fire routes and amendments to Chapter 880, fire routes, 480 Rathburn Road, 6 Colonel Sanders Park, and 105 Eringate Drive. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to move the staff recommendations.
Councillor Holliday moves to staff recs. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. EY 4.15 appoints the Emery Village Business Improvement Area Board of Management. Councillor Prout is not here today. He's asked to defer this the next day. Councillor Ford, can you move deferral?
I'll move deferral.
Councillor Ford moves deferral to next day. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 4.16, appointments to Business Improvement Area Boards of Management in my ward for Long Branch. Councillor Ford, can you move deferral to next day for me also, please?
I'll move deferral.
The next day. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 17, endorsement of events for liquor licensing purposes. Councillor Nunziata.
So, I'd like to move approval for the license.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I need a motion to add on two new motions, one from Councillor Nunziata, 4.18 with Heritage, 2375 Weston Road, and
yeah.
Councillor Holly's got a report request with a public walkway, that'd be 19. All in
Yeah.
favor of adding to the agenda?
So on,
All in favor of adding the agenda?
yeah,
Opposed? Carried.
okay,
And we'll just hold those down.
Yeah.
As Councillor Holly's not here yet.
Huh?
Your motion's not here yet, right?
Sure.
Oh, I haven't seen it. Okay, so let's just hold it down. We just got it. Okay. All right, so we're a little bit early. Okay, yeah, hang on.
so,
Councillor Hunter, 1 second. 4.4, preliminary report, 1218 Royal Road zoning bylaw amendment application. Councillor Holly, you held the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wish to speak to it, and I will only say that I will
So,
move.
1 second. Questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the staff recommendations, and I'll just make the comment that, to my colleagues, that if they look back in history, this community council refused an application immediately next door for a very similar request, and that is to divide a lot and to create a semi-detached home, which is not permitted by the zoning code. And I just wish to express concern about this application going forward, but I understand and have received advice that this is part of the orderly process to forward the preliminary report and set up a community meeting. I look forward to the community's input and the input from staff. And I just would like to ensure that we look at this with care because there is the possibility of continuing a negative precedent along that street, which is to divide lots and introduce housing types that aren't necessarily in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Welcome to the world of lot splitting. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. That might take a little bit of time. So what we're going to do, I guess we will deal with number 10. Traffic control signals Dundas Street West, Acorn Avenue, private driveway access in Ward 3. And I have questions of transportation staff. Good morning, Luigi.
Good morning.
Has a traffic study been conducted to see if the lights are warranted in this location?
Through the chair, yes, part of the submission for the proposal was a traffic impact study, and there was a signal warrant analysis that was undertaken, and the warrant analysis indicated that the signals met the technical warrants for their installation.
And this is part of Metrolink's site plan, correct?
That's correct.
What would the deferral mean today if I did that? I know Metrolink doesn't want that. What would that mean if I deferred it today?
My understanding is, again, through the chair, is if the bylaw for enactment of the signals is deferred for another month or the next cycle, my understanding is would put the project in jeopardy.
Okay. Why were Auckland or Subway Crescent up the preferred options for, since they already have lights there? Why not there?
Through the chair, so the lights that are proposed are also going to function as an access point for the Metrolinx project. So there will be an access off Dundas and Acorn. The driveway access will form the southern leg of the intersection, and that is required for technical reasons and for capacity reasons, the signals.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll just speak. Yeah, there's been some, residents been contacting us about these lights, but I know this is a very important project for not only my ward, for everyone's ward involved. So I'll be moving the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Nunziata, do you want to deal with yours? 1 second. What numbers?
So, the reason I've added this item on the agenda, which is 418, is at 2375 Western Road, which is the Plank Road building, which is a heritage building. It was built in the 1800s, and it has been declared and designated heritage for the past 30 years. And there was a fire a week ago at that building. Fortunately, the outside of the building was not damaged, but the interior was completely damaged. And this building is in a very awkward location. It's in front of a little strip plaza. So the owner of the property refuses to take care of this building. He has not cooperated with the city and with the community. In light of the fire, I just wanted to ensure that Preservation Services, that we do the, we proceed with the next steps with the property owner, Weston Historic Society, and the ward councillor to ensure that the repairs are done immediately, because if we don't act on it now, the owner of the property will not do the repairs that's needed on this building, and that's why I added this item on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Holliday, 19. Let me just explain what it is, because we...
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions of staff. I don't know if anybody else does, but I'll just speak to this very briefly. I've requested three components of the recommendation. The first is a report back. The second is to request Transportation Services to post a sign. And the third is a more general report about laneways. So back in 2017, Community Council voted to close a pedestrian walkway which links Acme Crescent to the back of the plaza at the corner of Kipling and Dixon Road. That walkway led to the back parking lot and was a place for pedestrians that live in the neighborhood to take a shortcut to the plaza. The previous ward councillor wanted to run a pilot to see what would happen if that laneway was closed. That project has remained closed, and it has remained in limbo since then. So this is a report request back to this community council so that we can make a decision one way or another as to whether or not we open it up or leave it closed. And I will say that I've received some inquiries from the local residents, including somebody that lives nearby that is a pedestrian with mobility issues and is quite concerned about how he will get to the plaza. And obviously I'd like to have a sign put up on that so that people understand that there is a future report coming, and that if there's input, I'm happy to hear it. And the third is this is just a general issue with walkways in Etobicoke, as they seem to be, some of the feedback is they're in disrepair, and I wanted to get a report, a more comprehensive one, on a strategy to bring these pedestrian laneways to the most modern standards possible so that they're safe and desirable and encourage walking. I hope you'll support those motions.
Thank you, Councillor Holliday. Any further speakers? Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah, so Councillor Holliday, this is a public walkway. The city owns a walk, and so the city has, over the years, have not maintained the walkway. Is that the issue?
Yes, I've received complaints about the condition of walkways at large in Etobicoke, in my ward. And what we find is, because they're not on the side of a road, the sidewalks tend to get a little bit rougher. The fences that line the edges of the walkways tend to get a little bit more beat up when the plows do go along there. And finally, the brush and the grass and the trees and things that go along the edges tend to get grown fairly far in, and people don't really want to use the walkways when they're in a rough state. So this is just looking at what our standards are to maintain them. We do maintain them, but we just want to take a closer look at it, and that's more on a city basis, because this little walkway is an example of a larger issue.
Yes, I have them as well. Thank you.
Seeing no further speakers, the motion is before you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Where's my sheet Okay, 4.5, intention to designate under Part 1V, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, 58 Wheatfield. We have a number of speakers. Our first speaker, Diana Compton. Good morning, Ms. Compton. Welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Diana Compton. I am the owner of 58 Wheatfield Road. First, I have never applied for a heritage designation for my home, and I am fully opposed to my home being designated as heritage. We moved to Etobicoke from outside Canada in 2008 and were completely unaware of any lists of any sort. We did not, to our knowledge, purchase a heritage home. Neither the purchase and sale agreement nor the MLS listing made any reference to a heritage listing. It was never disclosed to us. How can the City of Toronto enforce these heritage expectations without any legal requirement to disclose them? As to the actual heritage value of the house, it has been gravely overstated. I'm not sure why it's referred to as the Alfred Baker House with such importance. No one on Wheatfield Road calls it that. We never have. Alfred Baker was not significant to Etobicoke history. As an architect, he has only one small commission to his name, an unnamed building located outside of Etobicoke. The ultimate authority on historical significance is the Ontario Heritage Trust. They maintain a list of architects who've made contributions to our province. Alfred Baker is not on that list. The History of Mimico, a blog referenced in the report you have from your staff as one of the most comprehensive histories of the area, contains no mention of Mr. Baker, no mention of the house, no mention of Robert Street or Wheatfield Road. The original Mimico streets highlights are Station Road, Stanley, Superior, and Church, which is now Royal York, not Robert Street. While the house is old, it is no more historically significant than any of the other houses of the same era on nearby streets. For precedence, in recent years, neither the Blue Goose Tavern building nor the original Marie Curtis home in Long Branch were designated as heritage, and both have more historical reference than 58 Wheatfield. As to the house itself, it requires a substantial renovation. 2 80-foot maples have fallen on the house in the last few years. One was so big it required the largest crane available to get it off the roof, which it had crushed. As a result of the damage, the ceilings are all now cracking and many of the single pane windows are broken. Like the trees, the house is at the end of its life. My husband died in 2016 after a long battle with cancer, and my teenage children are ready to leave. For our family, the house is too big, too old, and in disrepair. I have consulted 2 builders, and both have told me it's much more cost-effective to build new than to undertake the renovation required. I need more suitable housing for my family, and forcing me to renovate where I don't control the decisions or the budget would be financially crippling to my family. The alternative is that you force me to sell and leave my beloved neighborhood of 11 years. Any real estate agent will tell you that a heritage designation substantially reduces the value of a home. Again, as a single income widow with 2 university-age kids, this designation would have severe financial impact on my family. Neighbors on both sides of me and across the street from me do not support a heritage designation. As you can see by many of the letters that you received for this meeting and many more sent to the Toronto Heritage Board, your constituents do not support forcing private homeowners to sacrifice their rights and be financially responsible for what ultimately becomes a public building. Would every person who has written to support this designation be as quick with their checkbook as their letters? I doubt it. I ask all of you, and I ask them, what if this were your house? What if it were your long-term financial investment and suddenly you're told what you can and cannot do with it? If the Ontario Heritage Trust does not consider Alfred Baker to be heritage worthy, how can the City of Toronto and how can you? A heritage designation at 58 Wheatfield is unwarranted, and it's unjust. It's not right to force a family into a financially compromising position to satisfy the whims of a few people. Such bullying by community groups is not our Toronto, nor is it our Canada. Please maintain the rights of your constituents. Do not support this unjustified heritage designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Questions? Councillor Hawley, question?
Thank you. What year did you buy the home?
2008.
2008. Do you remember who your real estate agent was at the time?
The selling agent or my purchasing agent?
Your purchasing agent.
I
I'd like
do.
you to read it into the record.
My purchasing agent was Belinda Blythe.
Okay, and then who was the lawyer that worked on your behalf?
Jonathan Griffiths.
And are they both representing you at this point in time?
No, I'm not buying or selling a home at this point in time.
Okay. And did either of them make you aware of the listing of this property on the Heritage Register?
No, neither of them did, and the MLS listing did not indicate it at all, and the selling agent did not indicate it at all.
Okay. And they receive fees for the work that they did for you? The lawyer and the real estate agent?
I paid the lawyer, yeah.
Okay. And do you have, besides the general objection to the listing, the registration of the property, on page 7 of the report, which I'm assuming you looked at, it provides a list of heritage attributes. Are any of the attributes in particular exception to you besides the general objection that you've given us today?
I'm not an architectural expert, so I don't have the means to debate what they claim to be architectural elements of the house.
I understand, but is there anything that you live there now, right?
I do.
Is there anything in particular on this list that you object to?
No, I object to it in general.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions? I have a few. Oh, I have a few. Mr. Crumb. I'm just looking at the decision history. The property at Wheatfield was listed, the former city of Etobicoke, in 1998 in the city of Toronto. Its inclusion of the city of Toronto inventory of heritage properties known as the Heritage Register was confirmed in 2006, so that was 2 years before you bought the property. And I just pulled up the listing on this house, and it said Old Mimico, Elegance and Grace, circa 1905, one of a kind. I'm just going to kind of skim through it. So you are aware this was built in 1905?
Yes?
Okay. And you were not told by your agent, you weren't told by anybody that this was on the register?
No.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you. Yep.
Are you aware of any other homes in that area that have been designated heritage?
I have reviewed the list, the map of all that are listed.
And there were others
in the area.
in
Yep.
your area?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
So I have another question. I forgot. On your letter here, you wrote to me here. So you'd like to demolish house to put in a duplex? Is that correct?
I
Or
don't
rental
know.
suite?
I don't know what I want to put in. I just know I want the right to be able to do it.
It says, my goal is to build a new and provide additional housing for the form of a duplex or rental suite, as well as accommodation for myself in the same location.
Yeah, for me to move forward, I need some rental income.
So you're looking to demolish to put a duplex in? Okay.
I don't know what it's going to be, whether it's a duplex or a multiplex or
Thank you.
depends what my kids want to do.
Those are my questions. Thank you. Our next speaker, lost my sheet, is Terry Carrick. Morning, Mr. Carrick. Welcome, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm here to speak on behalf of Diane Compton and her position of not having your house as a heritage site. I live in the neighborhood. I'm in your constituency, Mr. Grimes, and I support her not to have a heritage site. I find it interesting that no one from the heritage site is here to speak. I think that from my position, I'm concerned that the Historical Society is the hysterical society. I believe that she has a right as a citizen to live in her house as she sees fit to live in her house. I object strongly to a historical society saying that she does not have the right to live in her house as she wishes. I also am rather intrigued at Mr. Ford, your line of questioning in terms of what the lawyer or the realist,
That's Councillor Holiday.
Councillor Holiday had. I'm intrigued by that, the line of questioning. I think it's irrelevant in terms of her positioning and keeping her house. I hope there's some questions back. I would like to hear some questions back. And I take it that you will make a decision to the positive and not delay the decision and pass it to City Hall or the City of Toronto, in which Ms. Compton has no desire or right to speak there. That's the end of my comments. I look forward to some questions.
Councillor Holiday, question.
Yeah, I wondered if you could elaborate on your concerns with my line of questioning regarding...
I think it's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with her position as a heritage site. Why does a lawyer, real estate agent, X number of years ago have to do with her position today? If you could explain that for me, I'd be greatly appreciated.
Did you take notice of her opening remarks where they were based on her argument that she was unaware of the status of the home.
I did. I also
Okay.
noticed that during your conversation, you were in an other conversation with one of your staff and probably did not hear all her comments.
Oh, okay.
Is that not correct?
Uh, yeah, you know what? I actually take exception to the comments from this speaker, Mr. Chair. You know, I take exception to reference that I may or may not have been paying attention, because I can assure everyone that I was quite intently listening.
How can you be
But,
attentive when you're speaking to someone
you.
else?
Not talking, not speaking
Councillor
to you.
Dundas, you had a question?
Yes.
Actually,
Councillor Dundas, you had a
Reason
question.
for those questions and, by Councillor Holliday.
I
and
wasn't finished
we'll
yet.
ex- oh, sorry.
yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor, my apologies. I just want to go a bit further, sir, based on your comments. You were talking about the ability of the homeowner to do perhaps some future building. Do you have any concerns about what the plans may be for the future of the property?
No, I don't, because I know Ms. Compton very well, and she's very aware that she wants to stay in the community, will not do anything against the community, so I have no concern about that at all.
If Ms. Compton went for a variance at the Committee of Adjustment for a larger property, or went for a zoning bylaw change to build a type of property that may not be permitted by the zoning bylaw, would you be supportive of that as well?
That's a very hypothetical question, because I have no idea if she's going to do that. So I answer your hypothetical question with a hypothetical, I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. Do you believe that properties on that street or in general in the community should adhere to the existing zoning code and the existing bylaws and the existing uses as a principle?
That's an interesting comment, because you are more,
Not a comment, it's a question.
no, you are more aware of the zoning than I am. So for me to make a comment on that would be irresponsible of me, because I'm not knowledgeable of that as you are. So a very well-pointed question.
So, as a general principle, do you think people should follow the official plan of the city and the zoning code of the city? As a general principle?
In principle, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Dundas, you had a question.
Yeah, how long have you lived in the area?
I've lived there 12 years.
12 years, okay. So there's an historic society that's in that area, correct?
Historical Society, yes.
Right. And so they normally have meetings and consult with the community on designation and listings. Have you ever attended any of those meetings?
No, I haven't, and I didn't know they had those meetings. Are
Well,
they broadcast to the general public?
They're what?
Are they broadcast to the general public?
Well, normally, yes.
Normally, does that mean yes, or
Well,
does that mean
well, I'm
normally?
just,
What does that mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, you know what, it's
Okay,
not helping the cause.
anyway, I was trying to get to a point, but I don't think it's worth getting it to you. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, give it.
Councillor Ford, the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My only question is your objection to the heritage designation. Do you have more of a general objection to heritage designations, more of a property homeowner right standpoint, or the specific situation here?
Specific situation here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you, sir.
Is there anything else that you
No,
wish to
there's
know from me?
there's no further questions. Thank you. Our next speaker is from the Etobicoke Preservation Panel, Brian Mooney.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mooney.
I'm
Welcome,
Brian-
sir.
Just as a
You've been
reminder,
here
I'm
many
Brian
times.
Mooney. I'm the chair of the Etobicoke York Community Preservation Panel, which is a city appointed panel whose mandate includes monitoring, researching, and advocating for heritage properties within Etobicoke York. And I also sit on Toronto Preservation Board, whose mandate includes reviewing all of the applications for heritage properties and projects within the city. So this morning I'm here on behalf of the panel to express our support for the staff recommendation that city states its intention to designate the heritage property at 58 Wheatfield Road under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The Ontario Heritage Act in 1974, and that's when Ontario had its first act, allowed for the formation of citizens-based local architectural conservancy advisory committees to advise council on local heritage matters. In the late 1990s, the Etobicoke LACAC produced a list of properties with heritage potential across Etobicoke, which became the Etobicoke Heritage Register. As an aside, this spirit is very much what Community Council has asked planning to do in terms of identifying potential heritage properties in the city that are currently unprotected as a result of the demolition of the Bank of Montreal on Yonge Street, the Stollery Building, and in Etobicoke, York, this 10 Audley Street, the Schindler Building. After amalgamation in 2006, the Etobicoke Heritage Register was transferred to the City of Toronto Register. And under the Heritage Act, properties can either be listed or designated. 58 Wheatfield was listed. The thing about listed properties is they have absolutely no protection. All they have is a flag goes on their file within the city records. Somebody puts in for a demolition permit, the flag comes up, HPS gets notified, and they have the opportunity to go through and determine if the product still has heritage value. And that's what happened in this case. Heritage Preservation Services were told of the demolition permit. They asked the panel if we still felt the property had heritage value, which we did. As a result, they did their study, which went to the Preservation Board, which reviewed it and passed it on to Community Council on its way to City Council. So the listing just holds the property for 60 days while that decision is made. So 58 Wheatfield has been on the Heritage Register since the 1990s. Any lawyer doing a title search should definitely have picked up on the fact that the property was listed. Right? We hear this all the time. Oh, I didn't know. Nobody told me. But it's listed on the city sites, and it would be against the property on the property register. So why do we want to designate the property? Why do we want to interfere with this woman's life? So what I want to do is tell a story first. At the 26th of February City Council meeting, Councillor Grimes put forward a motion requesting the listing of a property at 150 8th Avenue. He did this to protect the cenotaph that was on the property site, honoring the people that had died in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. His reasoning was that as the years go by and the memories of devastating consequences of these wars drift further from our minds, the cenotaph serves as a reminder of war and provides the community with an important source of reflection. It is the physical presence of the cenotaph that really shows how important it was to the area. Until you stand there and see the size of it and the grandeur, you really understand how important it was. The same is true for 58 Wheatfield Road. It was one of the first houses built on the Henry farmland when the southwest portion of Mimico was started to transform from agricultural residential land. And again, it's only when you stand in front of this building, this house, to get an idea of how important it was as the city started to develop as a residential area from a farming area. So, in closing, I just want to say one thing. Our inheritance of architectural, cultural landscapes, and material culture is an irreplaceable asset and resource. And I think we should think about that when we make decisions on whether we list or designate or just destroy heritage properties. So that's why the EYCPP supports the staff recommendation and asks that you adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Questions? Councillor Nunziata, a question.
Yes, so is that area, is that a heritage district?
Sorry, Francis, I've got...
Is that a heritage district? Is it a heritage district? Designate?
No, I think there was...
So the Historic Society, have they gone through the heritage, like they did in Weston? Have they done what they've done in Weston?
No, that's never proceeded. I think
Okay.
there's a movement and a feeling in Mimico that there should be a heritage conservation district,
Yeah.
just as Long Branch and New Toronto. But there's priorities, and you've got to work through the prioritization list. The city only has a certain amount of money to fund the heritage conservation districts.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? I have some questions. Mr. Mooney, so in the decision history here, it was 1998 that it was actually identified, and then it was confirmed in 2006. I guess that's 2 years before Ms. Compton bought her home. Would the previous owner been notified that it was listed at that point? Do you know?
To be honest, I would only be guessing.
I'll ask that the
But I
staff,
would, but I would suspect that they probably were notified.
right.
Right, there had to be a process of public consultation when they designated, or listed. I don't think they just went out and listed and behind everyone's back.
And there's many homes in Mimico, the Blue Goose was mentioned, but you know, I've moved to make that historical. We're waiting on that staff report to come back. You're aware of that? And you're aware of the 11 Superior, the old fire station was, when that got developed, that was a big contentious issue down at Mimico, and also the Amadale Court site was very, very, and you've read this book, The Story of Mimico, right?
In actual fact, if you go back to the original Etobicoke Heritage Register, when they did the survey, there was about 165 properties in your old Ward 6 that were listed. That was a route that Etobicoke seemed to take. They preferred to list rather than designate. So that was the way they did it.
Great. Those are my questions. Councillor Holiday?
Thanks, Mr. Mooney. Can you tell me a little bit more about the process on this? So properties are listed through the process, and it would have been back pre-amalgamation. As you mentioned, these were listed by the council at the time. Where is that list kept?
The list is on Heritage Preservation Services.
Sorry, could you use the
website.
mic?
So it's.
Use the mic, Mr. Mooney. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's just hard for me to hear in the room.
We both got the same problem. It's on the Heritage Register, which is on the web, so that you can go in at any time. They've got a very nice interactive map, and they also have a listing of all of the properties. So you can go in on the map, you can go in, you can go in and you can actually search by property. You can see how many listed and how many designated properties are in the area.
And what would have been the process was that the process at the time? Is that the process at the time? Was there a website then, or was there a master listing
Well,
kept?
at that point, I don't think there would have been a website. I think it would have just been, you'd have to go to the planning department and search the information there.
And,
So I think it would have been a paper search.
and the listing, was it through a public hearing in any way? Like through a community council or a decision
Again,
on that?
I wasn't involved at that point,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure it would have been.
At this juncture, because it's compliant with a provincial piece
Yeah.
of legislation, it goes through a public process. Like we list properties at a community council, for instance.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and you mentioned something about a title search, or when somebody was doing.
Well, when you're going to go through and buy a house, your lawyer does a title search, right? To
Right.
make sure there's any liens or any conditions on the property. So I'm pretty sure that if you did a title search, you would probably find that the property was listed. Because I think the city files would, which they'd have to go through, and the impact files and the property rolls would probably have that information on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any further speakers to the item? Seeing none, questions of staff. I'm going to ask Heritage staff to please come to the floor. Good morning, how are you? This went through the Preservation Committee at Downtown City Hall, is that correct?
Yes,
And it was the committee's recommendation to list this or to designate?
yes, it
Yeah.
is. Can you hear me? Is this on?
It should, is it on?
I don't think the mic is on. Mike?
I'll try to speak louder. Is it? Okay, I'll speak closer to it. Yeah,
That's
yes,
better.
yes,
There we
it
go.
was considered by the
Yeah, so
Toronto Preservation.
going here, and this is a question for you or a solicitor, but it was listed in listed 1998 as a possible home to put on the list, but it was confirmed in 2006. So does the homeowner in 2006 get notified that this is now a listed property, when that would happen?
It's the Ontario Heritage Act doesn't require that. I don't know the process that took place in 2006 in the City of Toronto. Council approval is required to be put on the list, so it would have gone through a public process when it got approved by council. But I don't know what communication took place
Okay.
with owners.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Alfred Baker?
My colleague was probably better.
Well, there we go.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me? at
Yeah.
this time? Thank you. Just to clarify this, when we assess the property according to the provincial criteria, a number of factors come in, including architect. In this case, we did not identify the architect as a significant person. That's not the reason for designation. The name of the property is a convention the city uses. Each property that goes through this process is named and put on the inventory. This is not only to recognize heritage of a property, but also it helps clarify what the property is, opposed from a street address or a legal address, which sometimes change. So we're not saying Alfred Baker himself is significant. One of the reasons is the records do not exist anymore, unfortunately, for Etobicoke to have that kind of detailed research. But what we are saying is it meets the criteria in all three bases. On the associative value for the development of the neighborhood, one of the first properties on the former Hendry Farm, one of only 4 residential buildings within this quadrant that are recognized on the Heritage Register, as well as its contextual value for Mimico, and its design is an arts and crafts influenced house, which is quite unique in the area. So
Those are the three you
bases.
just went through.
Yes, not Alfred Baker himself.
Okay. Those are my questions. I have a question for the solicitor, so. When a house like this, I'm reading the old Mimico Elegant circa 1905, sun-filled, lead glass windows. Is it not the agent's responsibility to do a search on this to let the new buyer know that this house is on the city's list?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, we cannot advise any private residents with respect to any claims that they may have. However, in searching title, a solicitor in general would have to look at any potential restrictions on the property, and listing and designation under the Heritage Act would create a restriction on the use of the property, which would likely be properly disclosed to any potential purchaser.
Okay, that's why I talked to a couple of real estate agents myself on this, and they said this should have been disclosed by their solicitor. Just on the question of, I guess on buildings, on the zoning, they're talking about building a new duplex or rental suite. Would that be permitted on this property? Do we know?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's something I'd have to research. I'm not familiar with the zoning specifically on that property, but I could find out for
Yeah,
you.
I don't think it would, but those are my questions. Any further questions of Heritage or, yeah? So Councillor Nunziata, is it Heritage?
Pardon?
Who do you want, Heritage?
Why the heritage plan? Just a question. So when there's homes that are listed in a heritage district, now it's my understanding this area is not it has not been designated heritage, right? That the area, correct? So when there's, for example, if there's a committee of adjustment application or a planning application, then planning would highlight that and that it has been listed as heritage.
When
Like to the agent, to the owner prior to going to the planning department, correct? Even if this hasn't come forward for demolition, it would still be highlighted through the planning process. Am I correct?
through the planning process, Heritage Preservation Services would be notified, and we would comment on a minor variance application.
But would planning though have a list when an application comes in of all the homes in an area that has been listed?
Well, again, through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean, the challenge is, again, it's not a heritage conservation district. So
Right,
there's
so
not
that makes it a little
it's not
more
blanket,
difficult, right?
But
yeah.
if we are aware that there are heritage properties in an area and there
Yeah.
is an application, one of the things that the planning division will do is check the heritage inventory
Right.
or the registry to see if it's either listed or designated, and we will pinpoint that. Yes, so if we're aware that there are heritage issues, if there are questions about the age of the house, and staff will take a field visit, and we'll contact our colleagues in HPS before we finalize any commentary on it. If it's a zoning bylaw amendment application, it is as of course circulated to HPS. If it's a minor variance, then we will do a quick, I guess triage is the word, of our own, and if we think it may have some issues with regards to heritage, we will advise our heritage staff as well to get further input.
So it would have been highlighted either way. I mean, it would have come through the process.
If there was a planning process involved,
Yeah.
but again, there are, again, if the current owner wants to build as of right, then planning would not get queued through a building permit application. That would
Right.
be up to the building permit staff, who would pick up the fact that it is either listed or designated. That's
Right.
correct.
Thank you.
Questions? 3, I wondered, is there an application in any way at the building department? Or has there been inquiries about work on this property or development on this property that we're aware of? Okay, so we'll
Through
stand
you,
that down
Mr.
for a
Chair,
second.
I can do a quick check in the system to see if there is a current application.
I can stand that down. Question for Heritage. Sorry, no, we'll go to Mr. Cresswell first. The size of the lot is 50 by 124. In Mimico, is that a candidate to be severed from our experience as a city?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd rather not make a blanket statement on that. Again, what we would do is we would do a review of the vicinity to determine if there had been previous consents. Is there a history of 25-foot lot? I'm assuming if you want to do a 25-25 split. Is there a history of that in the area? We would take a look at that. So being not familiar with the bylaw or the specificity of the context, I'd rather not make a blanket statement and give you an ignorant answer.
Are there lots that have been attempted to be severed at 25 feet wide in the Mimico, Long Branch, Lakeshore area?
There is certainly, as Councillor Grimes is very much aware, in the Long Branch area, yes, there is a very recent tradition of going to 25-foot lots in that community. Mimico, off the top of my head, I think we see them from time to time, but again, I don't know the specificity.
Okay, thank you. To Heritage, you had mentioned that this is one of 4 homes in the quadrant. Can you explain what the quadrant is, or how large the quadrant is?
We're speaking historically of what was known as the Hendry Farmer Estate. So that would be in the triangle formed by Roy York, Lakeshore, Mimico Avenue, and of course Lakeshore comes up to the point, that area.
Fairly significant size, so the size of a farmstead.
That's right.
The other thing I noted on this was that it was is it 1904, 1905?
It's actually 1908. I think it was
1908,
on the
close enough.
register circa, yeah.
From any research that you've done, how does that compare to the age of the homes in the vicinity of it, say the street, Wheatfield?
Well, as it states in the report, looking at a fire insurance map from 1910, there were only 3 properties to date at that time, and this was one of them. The majority of the streets around there were in more the World War I era in the 1920s, so it's one of the early ones from the subdivision.
So what I'm getting at, if I drove down the street, would this property stand out as something that appears to be much older than the other homes?
Yes,
Would
definitely.
A casual person would say, there's something different about that house. It looks to be much older.
Yes, the shape of it with the L shape, the stucco cladding. Most of the properties around are brick clad, and they are a worker's cottage. On either side, there's basically a duplex, more modern infill adjoining this building. So it does definitely stand out in the street as a heritage property.
Okay. Any idea of where the other closest heritage properties may be from this home? Are there a lot, or are there a few?
Well, again, in this quadrant, as I explained it, there's just the 4.
There's just the 4. Okay.
And because I don't want to misstate, one is on Dartmouth, on the corner of Dartmouth and Lake Crescent. I think the confirmed address is 41 Lake Crescent. And there's one at 12 Eastbourne. And the other one is another important one at the corner of Mimico and Queens, which was one of the Hendry farmhouses from the late 19th century. So those are the 4.
Okay. Do we have an answer on the building yet? Building application? Okay. Thanks very much.
Oh,
Any
sorry.
demolition permits, anything?
There are no current permits.
Any further questions? Seeing none? On the speakers, I'll start off. Not probably a popular decision with the homeowner, but I'm going to move the staff recommendation to designate this property. The homeowner did mention the book, The Story of Mimico, which can be picked up at the Mimico Library. I don't know any other community in my ward that has a book written. It's a very, very hot topic in Mimico. There's lot splitting happening now in Long Branch. We just heard Councillor Holiday talking about it, and people are you know, alarmed at what's happening. But heritage is a work in progress. This was built in, this book was written in 1967. Heritage is a work in progress. And until we start saving these properties, we're never going to have them. And I had the opportunity to go to Europe over the last few years and travel through Europe and see really what a young country we are. And I can tell you that what I've dealt with since I've been in Mimico, the Blue Goose Tavern, I have moved to list that, make its heritage. If I think if that went down, I think I'd get strung up by the community. But that's a very important building. Mr. Cresswell will tell you, we had a major application down Lakeshore at the Amadale Courts, where the gardens in there and the building is there was top of mind. The fire station on Superior Avenue, the cenotaph I've just moved to make sure that's historical. And I had to list the whole property. The building's not historical, but the cenotaph, if something happened to that. But it's really on the top of people's mind, the heritage aspect in Long Branch and Mimico. Mimico really, there really is no more Mimico, but if people are from Mimico, they say they're from Mimico. My family, my in-laws, my wife grew up in Mimico, and we had our first home in Mimico, and I'll tell you, it was a 1903 farmhouse on Heman Street, and that probably should be on the list. It's a 1903 farmhouse. When our family got to 5 kids, we were running out of room, and we knew it was a historical home. And now we knew that the windows on the side of the house went way down low, but that was to look out over the farm fields, and they were blocked in at a later date. But I did the history, and you know, I went through the listing, and it says old Mimico charm, stained glass windows, and I think you know, from the real estate agents I've talked to, do my research on, this should have been disclosed by the buyer's solicitor, which didn't seem like it happened. But it's not a popular decision with the homeowner, but until we start saving these properties, we're not going to have them. So with that, those are my remarks, and it's unfortunate for the homeowner, but I know this is a property that's, there's letters from both sides, but I know the people from Mimico would like to see this saved, and those are my remarks. Any further speakers? Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be supporting the recommendation. And I mean, just when we started the meeting, I had an added item on a heritage building in my ward built in the 1800s that was a fire, and that we're trying to preserve that building. But, you know, and I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, is that when the owner purchased the home, I mean, that the real estate agent or the lawyer should have flagged it. Just like they do everything else, if there's any arrears or conditions or front yard parking pads that are illegal. I mean, this happens all the time, and that should have been identified. So, and I agree, Mr. Chairman. You know, I know this area, the area hasn't been designated heritage as of yet, but I'm sure that will happen. But in my area in Weston, we have the Weston Historic Society that's been working very hard for the past few years in the Heritage District, and we actually, we completed phase 1, we're working on phase 2, and we have a number of homes in Weston that are heritage that have been designated and listed where applicants, builders are coming forward daily to the Committee of Adjustment. It's practically every Committee of Adjustment hearing, you get 1 or 2 where they want to demolish the home and build a couple of semis with front yard parking, and it just really destroys the character of the community. And we need to work closely with the Historic Society and Preservation Services to preserve the homes that we do have, because people are very proud when they live in a heritage district. They're very proud on living in the community. There's huge trees on the property, and as far as the value of the homes, I believe that the value of the homes are skyrocket when you're in a heritage district. I couldn't afford a home if I wanted to buy one in a heritage district. They're so expensive. So I will be supporting your recommendation, and I hope that the historic society that you have in that area that will work towards and designated the district as well. So when there are applications coming forward, there at least there's protection and it's being identified.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Councillor Holliday, speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are very tough decisions to make. We've heard them before at this community council. We normally have quite a long lineup of people that offer differing views. Today was a little shorter, but I'm quite clear on my position on this matter, and I'm going to support Councillor Grimes in designating this property. I would like to say my reason why. There are a couple of pieces here that stand out to me. The first is a comment provided by Ms. Compton here that talks about this as building a new home in the form of a duplex or a rental suite. And to me, that stands out. That's development. And whether it's a large scale or a small scale, it appears to be the intent of the property, even though that didn't come up completely in the questions. The second part was it was very clear that we had established that the advice had not been provided by the real estate agent or the lawyer. I think that is important. But the most germane to me was when I questioned what aspects of the report were troubling with respect to the description of the attributes of the property, and I didn't get an answer back. What I got today were very, very superficial arguments about not being aware of the designation on the property, and some comments about the financial burden, which I respect. It is expensive. And then I got a lecture about the process from the second speaker. What I see before me is a very orderly process. This has been put on the register, this has gone to the preservation panel, and it has come here to be forwarded to council with respect to its designation. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the process before me. And so I probably would have entertained a deeper discussion about the attributes of the home that were troubling, to have a higher level discussion about what's in this report and argue some of the things that are arguable, maybe some of the architectural merits of what is being designated, but instead I just got a flat-out rejection of the process, and I see no problem with the process. So I'm going to support the process and the law.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ford to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair, I too agree with what my colleagues have to say, but I'm having a little bit of a hard time here, like Councillor Holliday said. But I don't know if I'm going to be supporting the heritage designation. On the part of kind of the specific situation here, and I'm a supporter of heritage, and I think the Mimico community has some very rich heritage that has to be protected. There's no question about that. But one of the things I wanted to do is understand just the immediate neighborhood and the street and what other homes are doing there. And what I can see is, homes are slowly, homeowners are investing in properties and redesigning them. And I think this homeowner should have the right to doing that. Whether it is changing the zoning on the property, well, I think that's a whole other different discussion, but by limiting or putting a financial burden on someone with those specific situation, I kind of have a challenge with. So I will not be supporting the heritage designation.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Moving the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Holliday, you have a motion to introduce and enact certain bills.
I do, thank you, Mr. Chair. That the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws Bills 401 to 405 prepared for the March 19, 2019 meeting 4 of the Community Council, excluding Bill 402.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Ford, you have a motion to introduce and enact the confirming bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceeding of the Etobicoke York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 4 on March 19th, 2019.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion adjourned by Councillor Holiday. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.